This is the author. I hope you enjoyed this story. Now I'm going to tell you how it came to life. The hardest part about writing a book is usually finding the time to write. There are so many things that compete for my attention, but thankfully, writing practice isn't one of them. Writing practice takes care of itself because thanks to short form, I can read way faster than I can write. Normally, reading a nonfiction book can take me weeks, but with short form, I can read dozens of books in just hours because I can read all of these summaries and highlights that other people have already done. This saves me a ton of time because I end to have to sit there highlighting every important point myself. Sometimes I even skip to the end and start with the conclusion first, which is super helpful when I am planning out my book or when I am trying to figure out if the book is even worth my time to read in the first place. If I decide to read the whole book, short form gives me the rest of the summary along with key insights and interesting quotes. And the best thing is that I can save all of my favorite highlights in one place, which means I can always refer back to them when I need inspiration or when I am trying to remember what I've learned. I'm a huge fan of short form, and if you want to try it yourself, let me tell you how easy it is to use. You can read short form either in their app or on your web browser, which makes it really easy to multitask. You can read while you're cooking dinner, while you're driving to work, basically anytime and anywhere. To read a book on short form, you can choose from thousands of titles in their library, and you can browse by topic or by what's popular right now. So if you don't have any idea what to read, you can easily find something that sparks your interest. And if you finish a book that you really liked, you can always go back to the top and hit the Read Full Book button where you can read the full original text. If you prefer audiobooks, Shortform has you covered because all of their summaries are available as audio. So if you want to listen while you're reworking around the house, or if you want to listen while you're re-driving, you can do that as well. Plus, listening to audiobooks on Shortform helps me with writer's block because I can hear the story in my head without having to waste energy visualizing it myself. Now, back to the story. So my editor asked me if I could write a taboo romance story, and I was like, okay, I got this. And I wrote this story in like 3 days. I wrote it very quickly, but I was also very nervous about publishing it because I have unwritten a taboo romance in a really long time. So I needed some research material, and luckily, I have friends who have given me lots of research material. There are 2 big things that I wanted to explore in this story. The first is the idea of childhood friendship. A lot of readers have told me that the best friends to lovers trope reminds them of their real-life experiences. So I wanted to incorporate that. The second thing I wanted to explore was the idea of self-discovery. How do you change as a person? How does your environment affect you? And how does that affect the way other people treat you? So I actually wrote this entire story in second person because I wanted the reader to experience those things alongside the main character. When I wrote the first draft, I had a very different ending in mind, but when I shared it with my critique partner, she was like, "No, that ending doesn't work. Here's why." And she gave me a bunch of reasons, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you're totally right. Here's a better ending." So if you're curious, you can check out the original ending. When I reread this story a year later, I was like, oof, cringe. Like the dialogue felt very forced. So I am glad that I have a great editor because they helped me punch up the dialogue and make the story feel more natural. One of my favorite parts of this story is when the main character says, "She wasn't just my sister's best friend anymore. She was mine. And I wrote that line because I wanted to show that the relationship between Chloe and the main character was evolving throughout the story. They were becoming best friends themselves, even though they're technically not related. Another thing I love about this story is that it plays with expectations. I like to mislead my readers and subvert their expectations, especially when it comes to taboo relationships. I purposely chose ambiguous pronouns when I introduced the characters, so that you would know whether the story was going to be from the perspective of the older sister or the younger sister. I also played with the timeline of the story, so that you would know exactly when the story was taking place. I just wanted to create a sense of mystery. One of the biggest challenges I faced when writing this story was making sure that the main character's feelings were valid. I didn't want the reader to think that she was crazy or delusional or making up her feelings for Chloe. I wanted her feelings to be real and true. Even though the situation was unconventional, I achieved this by writing from the main character's point of view and by giving her agency in her own story. I wanted the reader to understand why she fell in love with Chloe and how her feelings developed over time. The setting of this story was inspired by my own childhood. I grew up in a small town and I spent most of my summers at home with my siblings. I remember spending hours on end in the kitchen eating snacks and drinking iced tea, and I wanted to capture that feeling of lazy summer days in this story. I also wanted to play with the idea of nostalgia and how the past can come back to haunt you. In terms of writing style, I aimed for something that was both lighthearted and emotionally resonant. I wanted the story to be fun and sexy, but I also wanted to explore the emotional complexities of the relationship between Chloe and the main character. I achieved this by using humor and witty banter to balance out the more serious moments in the story. If you enjoyed this story, I'd recommend checking out some of my others. And if you're interested in reading more stories like this one, you can check out my Forbidden Love playlist. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.